The reason I'm showing you this is because it's the first time I ever got to work with Tony Ross, who to this day remains my favourite illustrator. And there's a nice story behind it, because I'd just written Dr. Zargel's book of Earthlets and left it as a sheet of A4 on Klaus's desk, and he was mulling over whether or not to publish it. And Tony came in after a nice boozy lunch and read it and said, I want to illustrate that. And we don't talk about the books very often, illustrators and writers. It's almost shoved under the door and the illustrator gets on with it. So I didn't know what I was going to get back. So when I saw Earthlets, I think I nearly fell off my chair laughing, because he really is the funniest author, illustrator I've ever met, and I still work with him today. Okay, Tadpole's Promise. Now this just happens to be my favourite picture book ever that I've written. It did win the Silver Smarties, and it was a bit embarrassing because we got up because we thought we'd won the gold, but we hadn't, and we've been very bitter about that ever since, me and Tony. This is the edition to mark the 15th anniversary. Now, this is quite an interesting story because I wrote this when I was 18 and I hung on to it, and when I got my first book published I sent it off to Klaus hoping that I could get another £200. But he said, oh no, we can never publish this, it's a tragedy, you know, people will burst into tears, it's terrible, it's cruel. So I just shoved it in a drawer, and then I waited a few years and I represented it, and he'd forgotten all about it. And he said, oh, this is marvellous. And sure enough, he published it. Tony illustrated it. And one of the reasons I love this is the design, because it's this way up for a very good reason. The story is about a tadpole and a caterpillar falling in love. And obviously, the caterpillar habitat is up here on the willow, and the tadpole lives in the water, and they meet in the middle every time. So I thought that was a stroke of genius with old Ross to do that. There we go. Where the willow meets the water, a tadpole met a caterpillar. They gazed into each other's tiny eyes and fell in love. She was his beautiful rainbow, and he was her shiny black pearl. I love everything about you, said the tadpole, but then this is the clincher. I love everything about you, said the caterpillar. Promise you'll never change. I promise, he said. Of course, that's going to lead to a disaster, isn't it? Now, this book has been used in America to teach philosophy to teenagers, and I got some letters back that were absolutely hilarious. They were trying to analyse it, and they got it completely wrong. And they were saying, was it because I'd had a terrible heartbreak or something that I'd been forced to write this book, and I was being anti-feminist because the caterpillar was dressed in pretty colours. It was absolute nonsense, really, but it just goes to show what people can take out of a book. Anyway, that's the one I love most. And here's another book that has seemed to be very popular in schools, mostly because it talks about the environment. And this came about because there was a new illustrator on the block, and they wanted someone to write a story for her, and she couldn't think what she wanted it to be about. And so I just said to her, just draw me a bog baby. She said, what's a bog baby? I said, I've got no idea, draw it, and then I'll see if it inspires a story. And it did, and this one has been on the curriculum now for ages, and it's the one I do most of my workshops in school. It's particularly nice because it means I can take in all my little bits from nature, like my cocoons and my I've got some snakes up here, which are rather good. I've got one thing off. And I always show the kids these. Because very often kids haven't held things like snake skins, and I show them my beetles, and even though they're dead, we talk about the circle of life and things like that. So this is a very good book to teach that. And it's all set in St Albans where I live, so it's sort of semi-true about me and my sister. A lot of my books are about me and my sister. This is one of a few attempts I've had at writing short novels. I've written some longer ones for teenagers. One was called Naked Without a Hat, which did quite well. Another was called The Hard Man of the Swings, which was the story of my builder. When he used to come and do my various bits of building work, he used to tell me stories about his childhood. And he lived in shocking poverty, but the wonderful thing was he didn't seem to realise. So I said to him, you've got to write all this down. and I'll turn it into a story for you. We'll split the royalties, which we duly did. Right, but this is Dumb Creatures. This has won a few awards, and at the moment we're hoping it's going to be made into a film, probably for the TV. But again, this story came about for mixed reasons. There were two different elements that came together. The first was when my daughter was at school at Hazelwood. There's another little boy in the class called Tom, and Tom couldn't speak. For whatever condition he had, he couldn't speak, so he used to use sign language, and all the other kids learnt it as well. It was lovely. Now, I also knew in the back of my head that gorillas can use sign language. There's a gorilla called Coco who had quite a large vocabulary. Obviously they can't speak because of the way their throats are formed, but they can recognise words, and they can actually form sentences and make jokes. Now, this coincided with me going to London Zoo, where incidentally I got married. I got married in the aquarium. We adopted animals for all our bridesmaids. I was at London Zoo by the gorilla enclosure, and there was a female gorilla looking really, really depressed. When I asked the keeper what was wrong, he seemed very depressed as well, and said, well, she's had a baby and they've taken it away for a breeding program in America, and basically she was grieving for this baby because they're supposed to be together for at least 7 years, gorillas. So all those ideas came together, and this is a story about a little boy who can't speak and has to use sign language, and he goes to the zoo and sees a gorilla, and she signs to him that she's expecting a baby, and they develop a relationship, and it ends with him taking his baby sister into the gorilla enclosure because he knows he can trust the gorilla. And of course there's a huge hoo-ha, everybody's frightened, and he refuses to come out with his baby sister until they bring the gorilla's baby back. It has a happy ending. That's Dumb Creatures. At the moment, I'm doing a series with Tony Ross about internet safety and bullying on mobile phones and oversharing. So this is the first one in the series. This is Chicken Clicking, and it's about a chicken who breaks into the farmer's house and starts using his internet. First of all, she just orders all sorts of jolly things for herself. I'll show you what she... Oh right, she bought a motorbike and some bees and a hat. And then she started buying things for the other animals in the farmyard. But then she found they'd all gone off because she sent them on holiday, and she didn't have a friend. So she went online to find one, but of course she didn't tell her parents, and arranged to meet this friend in the woods. But of course it wasn't who she thought it was the fox. So let that be a warning to us all. There's two more in that series. One's called Troll Stinks, and that's the one about mobile phone bullying. And then there's going to be a new one called #Goldilocks, which is about oversharing and what happens to Goldilocks when she decides to take lots of selfies when she's with the three bears. Well, they're not there, of course. There seems to be a lot of bears in my life, and two of the books that I particularly loved when I was a child, one was Winnie the Pooh and the other one was Paddington. And when they made the first Paddington movie, I was absolutely thrilled to be asked to write a novel to go with it, which I did. Michael Bond had always been a great hero of mine. I'm not a hero worshipper, but Michael Bond was someone I'd always wanted to meet. And for some reason they wanted to keep me at arm's length. But I was at a publishing summer's party and I saw Michael sitting on his own, and I went over and we got on like a house on fire. And he invited me to come round to his house for tea, which I did. And I had a most wonderful afternoon. He was telling me all the stories about his war efforts, and he was out in the desert. And he's written some books called Olga Polga about guinea pigs. And I was delighted to see he'd got guinea pigs just running wild in his house, and that the bottom of his trousers were chewed because they would beg for crisps in the evening and nibble his trousers till he gave in. And they used to live in the hem of the curtain. And he'd built them a fabulous castle out of cardboard. So that's the kind of chap he was. So real honour to be able to write a Paddington book. And then, out of the blue, I was asked to write this one, The Best Bear in the World, which is for Winnie the Pooh's 90th anniversary. Now, my mum used to read Winnie the Pooh to me nearly every night when I was small, but never in my wildest dreams did I think that one day I would be asked to contribute to the best bear in all the world, which, as I said, is to celebrate the 90th anniversary of Winnie the Pooh's arrival. Now, there were 4 authors involved, and we all had to emulate A.A.Milne, but I think I've probably emulated him all my life in many ways. So, yeah, thank you, Mr. Milne.